Welcome to Tracing Your Family Roots. My name is Arlene Sachs, and this is Chuck Mason. And today we're going to talk about DNA a little bit.
Kind of turn the tables a little bit. So what are the most common companies doing DNA testing today?
Well, there's a number of companies, and it sort of depends on what you're trying to do as to what company you're going to use. Probably the best-known genealogical company is Family Tree DNA. They were started for the purpose of doing genealogical research. Another one is 23andMe. 23andMe probably has had more people tested, but many of the people that test with 23andMe are interested in medical information. So they're not necessarily going to answer you if they show as a match, because they just want to know their background or medical things.
Right.
And they were, of course, stopped from doing some of their medical, giving out the information, but there's still ways you can get that information. Another one is Ancestry. They're not going to give you quite as much of your or help you as much with your genealogical stuff, and National Geographic Project, which is probably the oldest one. And that's the one that where it first came out maybe 10, 12 years ago, of the patterns of migration. That's what they were interested in. They're not going to necessarily give you your individual ones. I guess one of the things you want to look at, if you haven't tested with anybody other than Family Tree DNA, you need to take your results to Family Tree DNA, and you can do that very easily. You can transfer your information over there and get the benefits of some of their things. You can get a certain amount free, but if you want still more matches, then you have to pay for it.
Have to pay for it. And which of the companies is it that you actually use the most?
I would use Family Tree because they're the ones that are interested in the genealogy.
Okay.
They've set up all of these projects that we'll talk about later on, that once you get your results, you want to join one of those projects. Because that's how you'll find your cousins.
Okay, and what are the different kinds of tests that they have?
Probably the most common one these days is the autosomal. That's what everybody's talking about. They didn't do that at first. I think they test like 750,000 locations on that. So it sounds like a lot, but you've got billions of them in your body. And they just pick 750. Now that one goes across male and female. So that one is what's used most now. The mitochondria DNA tests just the maternal line. So if you want to make sure that, well, anyway, it's just the maternal line, and it changes very, very slowly. And the male, the Y DNA is the one that was used first, is the most common, or was the most common. It was the only one that was used. And there's also an X DNA that tests that it can do, and it's very limited use on that one. Autosomal is much more useful.
And what actually passes from parent to child when
Okay,
we're
let's
talking
take a look
DNA?
at this slide, which is in color. And it's, again, a simplified chart. And what it shows, in looking all the way on the left-hand side, you see, and they've simplified this a great deal, this great-grandfather has two different shades of blue. And you can see that there's a blue passed on to the grandfather, and the yellow is passed on from the grandmother. And it's simplified because on that particular chart it shows a single blue line and a single yellow line. That's one chromosome, remember?
Right.
One chromosome pair. But in reality, those would be mixed up, and we'll look at that in a little while. But this simplifies it a little bit. By the time you get to the next level, you do see the yellow and blue mixed up as it passes on to the child. Again, the mixture of this parent and the green and pink from the mother's side, but in reality, by the time it gets down to the father, these pink and greens and blues wouldn't necessarily be in this single row.
Okay.
It would be crossed over. So, and you can also see this X, this blue, is the Y chromosome that's passed on from father to son always. So since this is a son down here, it has the father, and the mitochondria, it always passes to all the children. So even though this is a son, he's going to have the mitochondria of his mother.
Okay.
But that will not pass any further down.
And do the individual chromosomes interact with each other?
No, each chromosome stays within each chromosome, but the two that are passed, like if it's chromosome 22 and the chromosome 22 from the mother and from the father, those two intermix.
Okay.
But 22 is not going to mix with 23.
Okay.
At least the way I understand it. But when you get a population, you can, theoretically, you'd think for siblings it'd be 50% because you're getting half of the same. But and then it gives you 20, each succeeding generation's a little bit less, cousins 12 and a half and so on. But for the general population, you can usually find third cousins or closer. And by sixth cousins, it's by only about 1 in 50 chance that you'll. So when you find something that matches, for a sixth cousin, then 1 in 50 chance. So if you have it, then you're pretty sure you found somebody. And this is very strange that cousins will sometimes seem to be closer than the parents were because they're getting it from a lot of different lines. And so that they might get something that matches from a father and they from a mother, and it'll look like they're closer than the parents were. Now you've got to remember that goes back to your question a minute ago. Each of those chromosomes are independent. Each pair mixes up, but not across.
Across the chromosomes.
And it's not the individual spot that transfers down, it's a whole block of spots. I don't know whether it's 100 or 1,000 or whatever the amount is. It's a block that transfers at a time. And it says you can have, on one chromosome, you can have from 1 to 6 time number, range from 1 to maybe 6 blocks that transfer. And again, it seems strange when they say that 80% can come from one grandparent. But remember, that's on a single chromosome. So this chromosome may be a dominant, have something dominant, passes on down so that the grandchild gets something 80% from a grandparent. But there's lots of other things. There's 22 other pairs, 21 other autosomal pairs.
Which it's surprising that you would get 80% from one grandparent.
Think about this, and this is not for genealogy, but you have certain inherited diseases. Something is dominant, so it's the dominant part that gets passed on. So what that particular is as far as genealogical sources, but you think of something being dominant, and that's why it might pass on a particular gene.
And is there a way to tell where it actually comes from?
No. Again, because it's transferring in blocks, for siblings you get not a 50% match, but a 64% match because it's transferring in blocks. And for distant cousins are found really looking only at those big blocks because to see whether they have something like that. Now, your question just was, is there a way to tell where it came from? It looks like, on this chart, does look like it because it looks like you got the blue coming all the way through. But in reality, you're not necessarily going to be able to. And I know you can't possibly read what's on the screen there, but just look at that bottom line, and you see that that's all green. And if you look on the chart, on the side of it, it says the green is for Ashkenazic Jewish. That bottom green line there was a single X. That meant the mother had a line of being Ashkenazic Jewish going back. Okay, so therefore anything for sure, if something's green, probably came from her. I mean, this doesn't say the male couldn't have had some green as well. In fact, it did, because this person's a little bit over half Jewish, half Ashkenazic Jewish. So let's take a look at that very first chromosome, because I think this answers your question. Now you know that the green came from the mother, but look here on the top line, there it's green, and then suddenly the bottom line is green. You don't know, or you cannot say that the top line is from the mother and the bottom line is from the father. That's, you can see how they got mixed up there.
Yeah.
What you can see in this one here, which I think is interesting, is there's one section here where both are green. That means that the father had some green, some Ashkenazic Jewish, and the mother both. So that had to have come from both of them. But other than that, you can't looking at it, there's no way you could say this one came from the mother, this one came from the father. And all of those other colors that you see, there are all of the other mixtures of whatever else has come in. And this is not tracing your genealogy as much as the part that showing where the ancestors came from. Sort of like what the Geno Project would do, or something like the National Geographic would do. Now, these particular results came from 23andMe. They give you that chart. So that's a really nice way to see where a person came from. See, this is another example of that. A match is when either one of your chromosomes match one of the corresponding segments. Again, you can't, it's green here, it's green here, it's green here, and you know that just shows that they were mixed up. Now, the interesting thing, or the problem, I guess, is that Ashkenazic Jews would match over 80% of all Ashkenazi Jews that were ever tested.
So it's going to be hard to distinguish.
If both sides of both parents were Ashkenazic Jews, I think I should explain that a little bit. Ashkenazic Jews are those that were in Northern Europe, not Spain and Italy, but north of there, Germany and all of Poland, going east. From there. The Ashkenazic, the others are the Sephardic Jews, were around the Mediterranean. And then there's one other group that was like further east, which I can't think of the name right now. But so anyway, you get over 6,000 matches. It's a little bit hard to sit through that. And if only one parent is Ashkenazic, you get about 3,000. If only one grandparent, it's 2,500. And they say for the general population, you get between 600 and 1,000. I mean, because obviously, over the generations, you're going to have some mixture, and some that'll. But that's basically one of the problems with the Ashkenazic Jews. Some of the additional problems are what causes this high rate of seeming matches is because of the intermarriages. It was very common for first cousins to get married. It was even common for an uncle to marry a niece. Now, you certainly wouldn't do something like that in this day and age, but it was known.
Well, and you know, early in the American history, a lot of times you have intermarriage between families because there weren't that many prospective mates in
but
an
I
area.
think that was more cousins. You didn't find the uncle-niece marriage. I mean, and very often, at least in the case that I had, it was the uncle's third wife. So, you know, and then he died off, and she raised this kid and then went off and got married again or something like that.
We had an interesting family on the street that I grew up in where a brother and sister married a brother and sister. It'd be interesting to do a DNA test on. Unfortunately, they're gone, and the one couple didn't have any children, so.
Yeah, it would be
interesting.
interesting.
Probably make an interesting
I've read other stories where there were sibling marriages. So, you know, with two siblings married to other. It would be interesting to see what kind of results they get. They would certainly test a lot closer than they might be, even second, third cousins. And so when you do get a common block, it can be from several different
People.
sources, and because they, remember I said within the pair of chromosomes it mixes up, you can't tell which side it came from. So, and therefore a child's result may be a closer relationship than either of his two parents
Yes.
are, because here you have the two parents, but it was the grandparents that were, or great-grandparents that were siblings way back there, and by the time you get to the next generation, they're picking it up from both sides. Then. So you can't tell where. Whoops, let me go back on that. If you have cousins on different branches of your tree tested, they may be able to place some of the matches on the tree, because you'll see this one has a bunch of this, but you know for sure that they're a first or second cousin.
Cousins.
So that can help you sometimes say, well, they've got this orange color all the way through, it's got to be that, or
Right.
you know, whatever
Right.
the thing is. Now again, we're looking here at family tree DNA, and so that if you had your test results from 23andMe, for instance, you pay, I don't know, $50. I don't know what the amount is to have it on on Family Tree, because Family Tree has these projects. Now I should say, we're not connected with any of those. We're not making money from any of them. There's no way. I mean, we're just doing genealogy, so we're not pushing one. We're not pushing the other. But I'm pushing joining a project on Family Tree DNA, because that's where you're going to get your help. And you can correspond with these people. So then this is from 23andMe, so if you'd go to matches and you click on matches, then you can pick from a cousins list, and there you have the choice of something being in common with or not in common with. So you can perhaps eliminate something, so you'll find those matches that you have something in common with. And again, this is done on 23. You have to go through all of those web pages and things like that. This is a result of somebody using 23andMe, and I think it's one of the most fascinating pictures I have seen. Doesn't that look like?
Looks like it could be the same person, just in different pictures.
What happened is, I think the father had been adopted, knew nothing about his family at all, and I think that the next generation who got interested in genealogy found a cousin through the match, had the father tested, found a cousin through the match. That cousin had a picture of somebody that could possibly be this man's father, sent the picture, and obviously, when you put the two halves of the picture together, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Yeah. And I guess they had not only this picture, but several others that, so you could see the progression. And this did, as I said before, come from 23andMe. And I believe they found their cousins through 23andMe. So I just think that's fascinating.
It is. My parents have a picture of one of my mother's brothers and my sister's baby pictures. And if you look at just the faces on them, they look almost identical.
We did a show where somebody had found somebody, and the wife said, how come you got a colored picture? And it turned out it was from the other family, and it just had that family trait that all the way through. So yeah, this has to be the same family.
Yeah. Did you say that Ashkenazi Jews will find more matches?
Yes. And again, the Ashkenazi will find that 6,000 or more because of the family intermarriage. That's so you're getting it from both sides. And one of the things that they tell you to do is to use the furthest distance when you see something like this. You get something where it says, well, you're between a third and fifth cousin. You're probably a fifth cousin, again, because you're getting it from so many sides. Whereas for the general population, you're more likely to be a third cousin. So you sort of have to figure that in, because I guess at first they didn't realize that. No, I can't possibly. I know that this person is a third cousin, not a second cousin, or whatever it might be. So for the Jews, it tends to show a closer relationship than it might have. And here it looks like they're like third or second cousins, but they're really, and they know for sure that it's father and son. So, and again, it's this is sort of a repeat of that previous chromosome that we looked at.
We've got
you can show how
green.
It's green, and we know for sure that the green. Now, that's not to say that some of this couldn't have come from the mother, because it could be in different chromosomes. It could be different, but we certainly know that somewhere along the way that if you see the green, it's most likely the mother in this case.
Although the autosomal is now the most commonly tested and often called family finder, there were some others. What were they?
Okay, well, one of them is the mitochondria, and I haven't really figured out what the use of that is. I did have mine tested. There's only 16,000 locations, and it only changes like once every 1,000 years. So what does that tell you? You know, you have 50,000 other people that you match. I don't see too much sense in that, except there were 4 Jewish founding mothers who lived in Europe more than 1,000 years ago, and that might be interesting to explore. Probably that one example that we looked at, where it showed mother being Ashkenazic, possibly came from one of those 4. I don't know. I don't know the details of it. But, you know, it seems strange to say, how can you be descended from just 4? And the reason some of these die out is because in a family you might have only sons. So, for instance, my mother-in-law had only 3 sons. So, and her siblings had well, anyway, there's nobody else in the next generation. So therefore, that particular one died out in that line. So then mitochondria died out. And the same thing would be if a family had only girls, then the Y dies out.
Well, and we have that with surnames too, where if there are only females, no one is passing it on, and
the name dies out.
We're getting to that point with both my mother and my father's line, because there seem to be more girls than boys born.
Well, my maiden name has died out, at least among, I've never found another Jewish Ostheimer, although I found some that weren't, but they were so far back that I didn't try to match up.
And what do you actually get from the testing companies when you have your tests done?
Okay, let's go to that one. Okay, this is what you would get from family tree DNA if you were tested on the Y chromosome. And all you get is a bunch of numbers.
Yes.
If you look at this, so what does this tell me? I mean, it tells me less than the 23andMe, which at least showed where the family came from. But if you have only the Y tested, and I don't think that's done too much anymore, just the Y, since they've gotten the autosomal. But that's why it's so important to join a project, because then you find other people that have perhaps the same mutation that you do. In this particular case, there's a location 455, which is an 8, and that's happened only 2 or 3 times, because there's only a couple of groups that really have that strange mutation. But you can use the match list. Again, this is from 23andMe, because these numbers were placed on that. So then you're looking for other matches. You're looking for somebody else that had it. He's called a JM172, whatever that means. You can get information of who matches you. You can write to them, and hopefully you'll get an answer. If you don't know the haplogroup that you belong to. Then you can find out what haplogroup you belong to. See, family tree DNA is not going to give you the Y automatically unless you pay for it. It's a separate charge. But they can figure out what haplogroup you belong to by looking at some other things. And Stephen Morse is one of the people that digs into all of these backgrounds and figures it all out for you. You go to Stephen Morse, and over here on the black side, one of the options is genealogy, and you go to that, and you click on family tree DNA markers, fetching markers from family tree, or updating your Y research, and that'll give you the thing that you belong to then. This is on Stephen Morse's page, and you have to give him the KIP number and your information so that he can use your information and get it. Now, some of the projects, and we're almost out of time, there's a number of different projects you can join. Let me go to that. It skipped over that. You can join a surname project, which again is useful for most people,
right.
Not Jews. In Sid's group, there's 119 people with 95 different surnames. So it doesn't, the surname's not going to always help. Again, because Jews lived in different localities, and they were given different names, all sorts of things. You can also join a haplogroup, and that's probably the best because you know they match genetically. Right. And there are a couple of other projects, general projects that you can join. So.
All been very interesting and has really come a long way since the first lecture I heard.
So yeah, I guess the most important thing to get away from all of this is join a group. Join one of those projects, and that'll help you because they're the project leader can
assist you with finding things.